The war between Russia and Ukraine, which began in February of 2020, has reached a critical point in recent months. The invasion by Russia has primarily focused on the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. Despite initial gains made by the Russian army, they've been facing significant losses as the Ukrainian army continues to gain ground and make strategic advancements. The Ukrainian army has been able to successfully push back Russian efforts, taking control of key areas and inflicting heavy casualties on the Russian army. With the Ukrainian army gaining the upper hand, the situation on the ground continues to escalate as both sides battle for control of the eastern regions of, among others, Donbass and Bakhmut. The Russian invasion has not only caused destruction in Ukraine, but it has also brought international condemnation and increased tensions between Russia and other countries. As the war continues, the question on many people's minds is how much longer can Russia continue to sustain such heavy losses before it is forced to withdraw from Ukraine. Despite the heavy losses that the Russian army is facing, the war between Russia and Ukraine has been raging for almost a year now and shows no signs of slowing down. One of the most significant factors in the conflict is the involvement of Chechen fighters on both sides of the battle. The Chechen people, who are an ethnic minority living in the Russian Federation, have a long history of resistance and rebellion against Russian attempts at assimilation. For many years, the Russian government has tried to assimilate the Chechen population, but the Chechens have always resisted these efforts. This led to a prolonged and bloody war between the Russian military and Chechen rebels, which resulted in significant losses for both sides. The Chechens, however, were able to inflict some of the worst defeats in Russian military history through their use of guerrilla tactics. The Chechen resistance movement was able to gain significant traction due to the support of the Chechen Muslim community, who provided fighters and resources. The Russian government, however, continued to suppress and oppress the Chechen people even after the war was over, which led to ongoing resistance and rebellion. One of the most significant developments in the Ukrainian war has been the involvement of Chechen fighters on the Ukrainian side. Many Chechen soldiers and commanders who had fled their homeland due to the repression of the Russian-backed leader, Kadyrov, have settled in Ukraine and are now cooperating with the Ukrainian army. This has led to a situation where Chechen fighters are now killing each other on the battlefield, with some fighting for Russia and others fighting against it. The situation for the Chechen people is further complicated by the actions of Kadyrov, who is seen as a puppet of the Russian government. Kadyrov's rule has been marked by repression and human rights abuses against the Chechen people, which has led to widespread disillusionment and opposition to his leadership. This has led to a situation where many Chechen fighters who were once loyal to Kadyrov have now turned against him. The Chechen people are in a difficult position, as they are caught between the Russian government's attempts at oppression and assimilation and the actions of Kadyrov and his loyalists. Many Chechens have fled their homeland in search of safety and a better life, but they are still subject to harassment and persecution by the Russian government. This has led to significant numbers of Chechen refugees who are now living in neighboring countries such as Ukraine. The involvement of Chechen fighters on both sides of the conflict in Ukraine is a complex and multifaceted issue. It is clear that the Chechen people have been subjected to significant abuse and oppression by the Russian government, and this has led to widespread disillusionment and opposition to Russian rule. However, the actions of Kadyrov and his loyalists have also contributed to the situation, as they have repressed and persecuted those who opposed them. The situation for the Chechen people is further complicated by the fact that many Chechen fighters are now fighting and killing each other on the battlefield. This is a tragic and ironic situation, as the Chechen people are now being torn apart by the actions of two different sides, both of which claim to represent their interests. For many Chechen opposition members, joining a volunteer battalion in Ukraine to fight against Russia has become a personal mission. They warn that if Ukraine is not defended, the Russian bear will not stop there. The reasons behind this are rooted in decades and even centuries of Moscow's interference in Chechnya. The atrocities committed by Russian forces, the constant persecution of Chechen people, and the illegal occupation of their land have made this conflict personal for these individuals. One such unit is the separate Special Purpose Battalion of the Ministry of Defense of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, or OBON for short. They serve as part of the Foreign Legion of Territorial Defense of Ukraine, with most of its members having fought against Russia in the First and Second Chechen Wars. OBON was part of the Ukrainian forces' successful counter-offensive in the south of the country, including the liberation of the key city of Kherson a few months ago. In response to the help from the Chechens, on the 18th of October, the Ukrainian parliament adopted a resolution recognizing Chechnya as a territory temporarily occupied by Russia and condemned the genocide of the Chechen people. All 287 deputies voted in favor of the resolution. A month later, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky officially responded to a petition to recognize the independence of Ichkeria, which had collected more than 25,000 signatures and thus legally required consideration by the head of state. Zelensky recommended that the foreign ministry look into the issue. On the other hand, we have the pro-Russian Chechens fighting in Ukraine. The real role of pro-Russian Chechens in Ukraine remains a topic of much speculation and debate. Dubbed as Kadyrovtsi after their leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, these fighters have developed a reputation for brutality, and some argue they have a delusional sense of their own abilities. This reputation is rooted in decades of accusations of extrajudicial killings, kidnappings, and torture of Kadyrov's rivals and critics. On the 27th of February, a convoy of 34 armed personnel carriers was seen rolling into the Ukrainian suburb of Bucha, northwest of Kiev. According to Ukrainian military leaders and government officials, most of the Russian servicemen on these vehicles were ethnic Chechens. They were described as burly and bearded, dressed in brand new uniforms that fit them perfectly, and armed with assault rifles. They reportedly planned to quickly move through Bucha and enter the Ukrainian capital on the third day of the war. This presence of pro-Russian Chechens in Ukraine has raised many questions about their role in the conflict. Some believe that the Kadyrovtsi, who have a long history of fighting against Russian aggression, may have joined the conflict out of a sense of loyalty to their homeland, rather than out of loyalty to the Kremlin. There are also suggestions that the deployment of Kadyrovtsi was an attempt by Ramzan Kadyrov to repair his tarnished image, which had been damaged by accusations of extrajudicial killings and kidnappings, as well as a petition to dismiss him, which had been signed by hundreds of thousands of people. By deploying his troops, who are officially part of the National Guard of Russia, to spearhead a blitzkrieg of Ukraine, Kadyrov was able to boast of their triumph in the Kremlin and on national television, thereby attempting to mend his image. The involvement of the Kadyrovtsi in the conflict is a troubling development. Their reputation for brutality is well documented, and many fear that their presence on the battlefield could lead to increased violence and human rights abuses. Furthermore, their supposed delusions of their own abilities could lead to reckless decisions that could further escalate the conflict. But despite the ambushes, the aggressive street fighting, the counterattacks, and the Russian propaganda, the Kadyrovtsi and other Russian-backed fighters never reached the Ukrainian capital. They were ambushed in Bucha and stopped in their tracks before they could link up with other Russian-backed fighters on the Zhytomyr highway. It is important to note that information regarding the role and involvement of pro-Russian Chechens in Ukraine is based on speculation and rumors, and it is difficult to confirm without any solid evidence and without being able to verify the situation on the ground. The true extent of their involvement remains uncertain, and more research needs to be conducted to gain a better understanding. In conclusion, the involvement of Chechen fighters in the war between Russia and Ukraine is a complex issue that is rooted in the long history of repression and oppression of the Chechen people by the Russian government. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to support our channel